If I asked you to get a piece of paper and something to write with, and to make a numerical list of all the things that you would be willing to die for, how long is your list?
Panther 48.
Willing to die for.
Panther 48.
Willing to die for. How long is your list?
What is the tribal self?
Panther
The
48.
tribal self is what goes above the immediate acquaintances of the social.
Willing to die
The
for.
family, the people you know, live next door.
You would be willing
I'm
to
talking
die
about
for.
tribal self.
Panther 48.
I'm talking about those movies, those yet unheard.
Some new video today shows that some are calling gang violence at an apartment complex in Aurora. We see men there entering an apartment building with several weapons, then busting down a door. All of this taking place at the apartments, which have become a crime hotspot in that city.
Vicenta Arenas was at that complex today as people were moving out, saying they were scared for their safety.
This video is significant. It is the first time that we are getting an up-close look at some of the things that were happening inside this building. You're going to see two different clips. In one, people carrying guns, and another, two guys trying to knock down a door. The video shows a group of men walking up a stairwell at the Edge Lowry apartment complex in Aurora. All of them appear to be carrying rifles and handguns, and the video shot earlier this month. One of the men can be seen talking on a cell phone. They all then gather around a door and go in. Another video clip shows men forcing a door open. But what or who they were searching for, not clear. The video was shot in the building where Cindy and Edward Romero lived until today. They loaded up their stuff and moved out.
It's been a nightmare and I can't wait to get out of here.
This is how Cindy used to lock her front door.
Every day when we come home, we have to do this. Every time we go outside to take out the garbage, every time we try to go to bed at night, we have to keep it like this so nobody can kick in the door.
The couple's car and many others here were riddled with bullets after a shootout at the complex earlier this month. The Romeros say the trouble started when a large number of migrants began moving in. They had not been able to move out for different reasons.
We couldn't get any. We tried reaching out to the resources, but they told us since it wasn't actually a condemned building, we would have to wait until that was the issue, but we didn't want to wait for that. So the only help I got was after talking to you.
We showed council member Danielle Jurinsky the video. Today, she helped the couple move out and find a new place to live.
All right, I think.
Yeah, basically I did reach out to somebody that's in the rural area that's familiar with that situation. And he told me basically that, you know, one of the things that's been floating around is we thinking this is happening in an area where there's predominantly black. He said no, that complex, apparently there's a lot of people in that complex that happen to be immigrants. And so what's happening is the Venezuelans are just you know, they are bogarting, they are taking over their complex, but it's not black. You know, so the thing about that is one of the things that's kind of been floating out there is, hey, in the black community, how are we letting this happen when we supposed to, you know, have our gangs and so forth and be tough like that? How's it going down in the black community? Well, that's not the case in that particular area right there. It is immigrants. It is true that the Venezuelan gangs are moving in on turf like that, but it is not happening in a black area. So that's the little bit of information I did get on that in regards to that. So it's the focus is not that it's black folks, but it's other immigrants. But yeah, it's legit. It's definitely happening. That's for sure.
What I'm understanding is essentially that immigrants from Venezuela has came in, and that's one of the areas that they target to put them in. And since they're there, you know, because people don't change, a change in thought patterns does not occur just because you move from one place to another. So they come here and they operate exactly how they operated in Venezuela. So essentially, if let's say, for example, just use an example, if people from Palestine was to come here, if people from Palestine was to come here as immigrants for safety or whatever reasons, then they may operate the way they used to operating in Palestine. And why is this even important to the black community, Brother E? why would this even be important to us? Like Ward just said, it's not happening in the black community. So why would this be important?
Time. Well, I mean, because we poor. I mean, Trump said it, and everybody got up in their panties and got their assholes all tight and shit when he said motherfuckers that are coming across the border are not the cream of the crop. They're not the tip top. They're not doctors and attorneys sneaking across the fucking river in boats or drowning in boats coming from Cuba. That's not what it is. It's more broke fuckers being dumped in a broke motherfucking situation. A situation that's only going to be able to support so much. It's only going to be able to hold up so many people getting, food stamps or getting money or getting housing or whatever it is. It's only going to support so many people. So now you've got folks that are coming from another country and who are broke and poor and not moving into 90210 Beverly Hills someplace. They're moving into the hood. And where the black folks, by and large, the greatest part of our population, where do we live? We live in the hood. So there's going to be that much more competition. And competition at this level is always bloody. Psych, you know this firsthand. And it's going to, all of the stuff that we've been conditioned to accept over the year, gang violence, Bloods, Crips, all of that type of stuff, is going to pale by comparison if this continues on that trajectory. Because we're not talking about first world, quote unquote, US, first world gang violence. We're talking about third world gang violence. We're talking about motherfuckers that, you see movies and stuff about the violence and people hanging from bridges. You on the way to work and you see motherfuckers hanging from bridges and whatnot. And that shit is real. That's the way the motherfuckers down there operate. So the level of the extremeness, it's like you used to talk about how you was that cat that would go to the extreme further than other people would, which is what made you the threat that you were. These folks are willing to go beyond that shit and do a whole bunch more. And one of the reasons we know this is because, a letter was sent to Mayorkas, the head of the Department of Homeland Security, like a year ago, asking him certain questions. And then there was a follow-up sent by the same group of people to the head of the DHS saying, hey, we have word and confirmation that Venezuela is telling its some of its most violent offenders, rapists, murderers, all that type of shit, saying you can either stay in this penitentiary, in this hellhole, or you can go to the US. And that's been confirmed by the DHS, that they know this is going on. That Venezuela, just like, Britain and Europe opened up their jails and sent it to Australia, sent them to the US, Venezuela is opening some of their jails and then sending them up here. And so now you have this level of violence, this level of extremity, this extreme level of violence and the things that people are willing to do to accomplish their tasks now coming in and infecting our neighborhoods and taking it to that degree. And let's not even talking about the level of both dedication and organization even that these cats are bringing with them. So this is some shit that we just don't have. And it's a fight that were it to break out, us against them, so to speak, we're not gonna win. They'll have a unit, they'll have a block, they'll have a group of people coming from Venezuela with these cliquish ties that come into our communities eventually, because they're not gonna stay in one community. That's just not how this shit works. Motherfuckers don't come and move in to one spot and just stay there. Motherfuckers spread out, especially these motherfuckers. And like white folk like to say, I ain't trying to be racist, but all y'all know, especially you grew up in Texas or Fort Worth, oh my God, that these cats, because of the way their culture is set up and the way they operate, come in a few of them at a time, and the next thing you know it, the entire neighborhood has flipped and turned to them folk, to whoever they are. And that's how they're doing this. There's no reason to believe that they're gonna be any different in the way that they operate. And that's something that our community cannot withstand. We don't have the unity. We can't even call it a community. Our hoods cannot withstand that type of influx of folks with power like that, a power we still don't have. So that's why it's important, whether it's right now in our neighborhoods or not, is irrelevant. It's coming. It's here. It's done the hard part, which is get across the border. Now it's just a matter of moving around and picking which spots you want to go to. You know, New York and Chicago, all of those places have seen certain upticks, at least conversations about the violence that's going on. You know, there are Instagrams and TikToks and all sorts of things with folks basically casing up the gang community and the black community, saying, you know, where y'all at? They taking over, they're coming in, they're, you know, this and that. Where y'all at? And, you know, we are where we've always been, which is completely confused and castrated, sitting in the corner waiting for somebody to do something about our situation. And this is no different. So yeah, and matter of fact, what's her name? Nancy Pelosi told Bill Maher, this dude, Nancy Pelosi told him that they would like to see all of these undocumented folks converted into documented folks because they want their vote. So this, along with these other things, the monkeypox and shit in Ukraine and Israel and the economy, all of these things are setting up and positioning just before the election. Think about it. All of this shit is happening just before this election. There are states already letting the public know that they're not going to be ready to count the votes on vote day. They're going to need a couple of days extra after that. There are all kinds of things that they're setting into place to cause disruption, mail-in ballots, different things of that nature. Having a ID, Walls, your boy Walls signed a law in his area, making it okay for illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses. They can use the driver's license to go down and vote. So they're setting all this shit up for a reason. And that's the conversation that I think that has to really be dug into, and this has to be seen in that context, is that this is not some isolated something. These folks came over, somebody did it on purpose, sent them, somebody let them in on purpose. People are, the problem has been ignored in that community. The police haven't, from what I've seen and heard and been told, the police are non-existent. They know that there's an issue, and really nothing. The mayor of the city is saying one thing, the governor's saying the complete opposite. And so we need to really be aware of what this further, you know, we talk about sometimes what time it is. And you have to take this in the context of figuring out what time it is. What is this telling us? When we look at past empires, one of the things that destroyed Rome was this mad influx of immigrants from outside of Rome coming in and essentially diluting the population and having a bunch of folks who have no allegiance to the people that were already there, but now guiding the direction of Rome. And that's the same thing that's happening here, along with the stress and the weight on the economic system. So all of this shit is percolating. All of this shit is coming together, and it's signaling a particular direction at the same time. None of this shit is on accident. Shit like this doesn't happen just because. I know black folk like to believe, oh, that's just that I don't know why that shit is. White folks, people in charge and power, period, don't just let things happen. They're mastering and manipulating from the shadows, passing laws and going particular directions without you ever knowing. You know, keeping us concerned about Kamala versus Trump. It doesn't matter, because what's going to happen is going to happen. It's out there. It's going to happen. So again, taking in the context of everything else that's going on, I think it has to be part of a conversation about what time it is and what this is telling us.
Go ahead and introduce yourself, man, on the Panther 48. Tell us a little bit about who you are, man, your background.
Well, basically, man, my name is Shareef Ali. I've been here in Denver since 1981. I'm 56 years old. I own my own business for the last 34 years. I'm also a community activist, social activist. You know, I've worked on a lot of police brutality cases in here in this city, police killings, and advocating, you know, for Black people. And not only just Black people, but Latinos and poor white folks that got abused by the system. I've advocated for them, but mostly Black folks. You know, I've been knowing War for almost 20 years. Was part of the new Black Panther Party here with them here in Denver back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. So, you know, that's pretty much my background.
So tell me, in regards to just so we can kind of get more of an idea what we're dealing with. What is the Black population, even in Aurora?
The Black population in Aurora is about 11 to 15% of the total population in Aurora.
Now, we in those areas where this apartment complex is? Fill us in on that. Because before you came on, I did tell everybody that I heard word that that particular complex was not Black, but it was more so immigrants. But what is the dynamics of that area?
Okay, so when I got here in 1981, you know, there was Fitzsimmons Army Base that was open, Lowry Air Force Base that was open. So Denver, that particular neighborhood there, a lot of GIs and ex-GIs lived in that particular area. So you have Colfax here in Denver, which is the main thoroughfare through the city and one of the longest streets in America. So it goes through a lot of different cities, Colfax. So in Aurora there, a long time ago, it was mostly white, working class people that lived in that neighborhood in 81. By the 90s, it became a Black neighborhood. By the 2000s, it turned into a Latino, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Sudanese, you know, all of these different immigrant groups moved along that corridor where all of this stuff is going on. So the situation basically here in Denver is this, is that these particular complexes that they're talking about mostly are occupied by either Latinos or immigrants or maybe a little bit of Asians or a few Africans, Sudanese type, you know, but mostly immigrants. The Black folks have been pushed out and gentrified, so to speak, out of those particular neighborhoods.
So based on what Brother E was saying in regards to why we should be concerned as a Black community, being that oppression hits us and it starts from us and moves forward as it applies to this economy and just applies to just dealing with situations, period. What's your take on the importance of recognizing how this particular element, or just I would just say any third world element, comes and just starts setting up shop? When I think about that, I think about the video Glove put out, "This is America," but yet when we try to brag and boast about our level of game as it applies to taking over, then I think it is what's going on now.
Now, let me say this, brother, that a lot of these Venezuelans that's coming over here, that's in Denver right now, a lot of them look Black. And you can't tell that they Venezuelan until they open their mouth. You see what I'm saying? And they come in all spectrums of Black, from looking, mixed, all the way to the darkest of Black. That's one issue. So a lot of the Venezuelans here, they're indistinguishable from the Black community. Let me just make that point. All of them don't have the traditional South American or Mexican kind of straight hair, kind of brown to tan skin look. You got them too. There's a lot of them here too, but it's a lot of Black ones here too. And a friend of mine who works at a temporary agency that employs a lot of these Venezuelans that coming over to this country, he started a relationship with a Venezuelan woman that was working at the temp agency, and she stayed in some of those apartments that's on the news. And from her description, it was more like there was two different Venezuelan gangs that are vying for these apartments. It's not just, Venezuelans going around terrorizing Black folks over there. I haven't even encountered any Black people that told me that Venezuelans have accosted them or came onto them like that. And I'm in these streets every day. But the Venezuelans, they have rival gangs that are competing for territory and positioning. And so what you see happening in these complexes is basically Venezuelan on Venezuelan type of crime, or Venezuelan on Latino type of crime, Spanish-speaking people type of crime. Now, there's a lot of Venezuela. I'm not going to disparage the whole Venezuelan community, but you know, you got brothers out here, the Venezuelan brothers that's standing on the corner with the window washing stuff. They washing your windows. They at the temp agencies, you know, doing the day labor stuff. A lot of the women are working in the hotels and different restaurants and stuff. So you do have a working class of Venezuelans that's here, but you do have the criminal element too. You know, we have had gun stores that have been robbed. I was watching Sister Michi X the other night, and she was talking about it was 11 stores out here that got robbed. I don't know about that, but I know they didn't hit jewelry stores. They didn't hit gun stores. They've used cars to ram into buildings and rob buildings. So yeah, they're not only a threat to the Black community out here, but to the whole community. I'm talking about the criminal element. And I like the point that the brother made that was talking before me that says that, you know, basically they're letting out a lot of criminals and sending them to America. Either you're going to stay in jail down here or you can go to America. And a lot of them is coming to America. And these particular buildings, man, that they're talking about, these buildings have been condemned and boarded up, and they still up in there. These people don't care. Some of these people don't care nothing about no running water, electricity, because even though they don't have that at this particular building, they in a lot better situation that they was in down in Venezuela. You know, the esteemed lecturer, Dr. Renoko Rashidi, he pointed out several years ago that amongst all of the Black people around the diaspora, the Latino Black people have the lowest self-esteem because they have been beaten down more than anybody in Latin America. No matter where you go in Latin America, whether it's Mexico, Venezuela, El Salvador, Brazil, Black folks is on the bottom. So I'm not gonna sit up and fault all of the black ones that I see that's coming to this country trying to find a better life. I'm not gonna doubt that, but you know, I'm not gonna be against that so much, man. But I understand the concerns of our people, man, because when more of these immigrants come here, that means less resources for us. They don't want to give us our reparations. They don't want to give us no hate crime bills. They don't want to even basically give us social services that our taxes go to pay for, but yet and still they have all of this money for immigrants. Now I run a business here, man, and I sell like tennis shoes and sports apparel and stuff like that to feed my family. And I'm in the hood, man, and I see Venezuelans coming up and they're buying shoes from me, they buying the oils from me, they buying the jerseys from me. And a little kid, man, like 14, came up to me. He had a knot in his pocket, man. He peeled off $300 bills and bought 2 pair of Jordans from me like it wasn't nothing. And I'm like, where's this kid getting this money from? And then I'm hearing stories about how immigrants got 10,000, 15,000 on cards that the government then gave them, either state or municipal or federal level. They got money. And the resources for our community, man, is dwindling. You come here to Denver, in the hood, man, you go to McDonald's or the Burger King or the Wendy's, Kentucky Fried Chicken, it ain't nothing in there but Mexicans, Venezuelans working. Little black kids, teenagers can't even get no damn job, you know, like Calvin did back in the 80s working at McDonald's. You go there in the hood, these are restaurants in the hood, and they have absolutely no black employees whatsoever. That's hurting us. So, you know, it's a situation where I want to see other black people rise up, but If you ain't taking care of the black folks that's here, that's the problem.
And let me throw this real quick. Something the brother said made me think that it doesn't surprise me at all that they would be willing to move into some condemned buildings and set up shop and be content with that for the time being. Because the reality of it, I've said for years, if I have to go to the penitentiary, I would rather do it in the U.S. than somewhere south of the border. You know, they have the jail system and whatnot in some of these countries is insane, where you have, not all, but these jails that are run by the inmates. Like, there are no COs inside the prison. The CO, all the staff is outside, give them, you know, food or whatever from time to time, and they run what it is they run inside. I mean, it's a totally different world. So for them, and they're living essentially in squalor. So they come up here and if you want to know the rules on checking out, you know, some media materials from the college library, I'm your guy. I can tell you that. But, you know, I don't know the gang life and all of that. That's psych and war. Y'all know more about, you know, all of that criminal activity than I do, because, you know, y'all some reformed ass criminals. But I'm thinking, and tell me if I'm wrong, some black folk who are selling drugs in the neighborhood have whatever connect they have, 2 or 3 steps before it gets out of the country, and they got to connect overseas. In my mind, it's going to be much easier for these cats to set up that type of pipeline, to set up that type of network coming into the country, simply because they're from those countries and that area down there already have the connections, so they keep it all in-house, which is going to empower them, which means that part of the game is going to get a lot more dominated by somebody else and a lot more competitive. So even just on that level, the shit that we're having to do to survive, we're now in competitions directly with the source. Like, the source now has its foothold of its own folks in the country. They're not having to find people to connect with in the US to move their shit, to distribute their stuff. They've got their own in-house people here to do it. So that's going to cut their costs. So of course they're going to come up in those those circles and whatnot, which is going to make it that much hotter. Whether we're out there selling, working a 9 to 5, whatever it is, it's going to make that situation. You know, the economics drives everything. So the economics of it is going to bubble and make it that much more difficult for us to simply survive in our own neighborhoods for that reason in and of itself.
Well, that's already a realistic situation. I guess you don't watch enough good gangster movies to figure that out. But that's already a real situation. Anybody moving into real work, they connect, speak Spanish. You know, allegedly, they'll connect, speak Spanish. You know, if you getting it from E, and E got a nice price, E getting it from War is getting it from somebody named Jose. Usually, that's the way the process works. But the brother gave a lot of good information. He gave us some more detailed information about what's going on there in his actual city, and that makes a lot of sense. Another thing to think about, and I know this is not happening there yet, but this is just something to juxtapose history. Here in Dallas, we had a situation. You know, we never really had Cubans, Colombians, Haitians, anything like that, but we did have Jamaicans that came in the city real tough in the late 80s, and they kind of ran parts of the city in the late 80s, early 90s, especially in South Dallas. And I remember when they came, it's kind of like the brother was saying, kind of like what he was saying, when you got people that come from a different world, you know, we get kind of, the word I'm looking for, I guess you could say, we get kind of complacent, kind of domesticated here in America. And even our toughest neighborhoods does not compare to some of the toughest ran down places that they call ghettos in a place like Brazil or Venezuela or any of these other countries. It don't even compare. So when they came into South Dallas, the Jamaicans were willing to do things that were shocking to us. The Jamaicans were doing things that was actually terrifying to the average dude in the streets. And that era, in that age, I was young, but in that age, you know, you were just, basically you were scared of the Jamaicans. You know, you didn't run afoul of the Jamaicans because they were doing things that people were scared of. Matter of fact, entertainment always imitates reality. If you look at the movie, I think it was Mark for Death that Steven Seagal did. I think that was the name of it.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it with the Jamaican pop.
Yeah, with the Jamaican posse. And they was pretty much running the city. It wasn't until they kind of like they violated one of the 48 laws of power. It wasn't until they basically went past the mark that the brothers started fighting back. They did some in I think it happened in Dixon Circle. Somebody had basically messed up with some of their money, messed up with some of their drugs. So they went after the brother in Dixon, murdered him, his girl, and burnt his kids up in a bathtub. That's when the brothers started fighting back and ran them out of that part of town. And they ran from South Dallas and they shot up to Oak Cliff because they actually started fighting back. And that's around the time that South Dallas got its reputation for being so bad because of all the blood that was shed throughout that little war. But I bring that up to break down how certain people, like the brother talked about the Venezuelans, or we seen the video that we showed at the beginning of the show. You see, they were walking up the stairs, AKs, different weapons. You know, they moving like they move in Venezuela. You know, that's what they used to doing. You know, and you can imagine somebody, we done seen the video in Iraq. Imagine if Iraqi immigrants start coming here, how they would move in the streets. So just imagine that and how prepared we think we would be if that was in our neighborhoods. I just wanted to bring up that point, that little point of view for us to look at.
I remember the same thing. Without naming any names, I actually knew one of the kingpins in South Dallas that was a part of the Jamaican posse. And because back when I used to hang out in some trap houses, back one of the moves he made, he would take I think it was a 38 pistol, put one bullet in the chamber, spin it, and point it in his own mouth and shoot. And said, if anybody else is bad enough to lead, you're here, and pass it on. And what was crazy, he would always talk like he said, ancestors protect me, so I can do that and nothing happened to me. Who's protecting you? And I remember him walking around with a 50 cal Desert Eagle, and he used to point it at folks when he talked to you, just in the trap house. Not like he trying to scare you, but this is just how he spoke. That's how weird it was. And so yeah, the intimidation factor and you know, the craziness factor in terms of just disregard to life was just off the chain. And that's something we're not familiar with or really take into account when you talk about us here in the United States, because, you know, let it be told, the bottom line is we have a sense of entitlement. And that sense of entitlement has really created what I call self-displacement. You know, one of the things we talk about in the Panther Party, the three things that destroy us and prevent us from being able to have a collective conscience is self-displacement, the coping mechanism, and the denial mechanism. And the self-displacement had us not realizing just to what degree bad is. You know what I mean? So when we're not able to look at our condition from a global perspective, a lot of times it enables us, prevents us from being able to really attack things and recognize the importance of self-determination. Because when we talk about that, we have to have more of a global mindset in order to really be able to link in properly in terms of being able to accept, like what we say within the Panther 48, accept what it means to deal with revolutionary suicide, revolutionary struggle, or revolutionary culture. You have to have more of a global perspective. And having a global perspective makes you realize just how bad Africans got it around the world, in addition to what we deal with here, knowing that all of this is encompassing. But when we talk about the street element from that standpoint, is we get exposed to some things that, because of the way death is and the way political corruption is in these other countries, the level that we are used to seeing it here can't compare to that. What they go through based on what we go to is just on a whole different level. So that in itself disconnects us and creates a level of self-displacement that we tend to find ourselves basically, I would say, disarmed from the ability to be able to recognize what it means to even fight for that battleground, fight on that level. And so when folks move in from other areas that they have it worse and they come to the United States for an opportunity. Now, the thing about that is this opportunity, their attitude is, look, we just trying to have a better way of life. We don't feel like our government, our areas that we're from, our country we're from, is able to come back from the level of corruption that they're dealing with. And the only thing we come in the United States for is just have a better way of life. We could give a damn about the politics here. And so how do we connect? How do we connect with that? How do we connect with the fact that as African people here in the United States, based on what we see happen across the diaspora, as Black people just collectively, something has to change. But we're kind of like further behind the curveball than they are, because they have a culture, they have an intact way of life. It may be destructive and it may be corrupt. Again, a lot of that is because of what the United States has done, the CIA in particular. But nonetheless, the deal is when they have an agenda, they have an intent on their crime. Their thing is to set up shop, make some shit happen, and take over. They got an agenda. Whereas what we doing is still playing the victim role. When we play the victim role, then we expect our oppressor to help free us. We expect our oppressor to make a change. Whereas they're just looking at an opportunity, and through that opportunity, they gonna do what they do and come up regardless. So what's y'all thoughts on that?
I agree 100% with you. You know, they might say they'll just give me the opportunity, I'm gonna make it happen. I think that but here's the thing about being in the streets, even here amongst our people. You know, our people don't care about the politics. Our people, the streets. I'm talking about from the street perspective. You know, it don't matter who's the president. You know, to a dude that's a dedicated 100% folk, or a dude that's dedicated 100% people's nation. Crip, blood. If they really in the streets, I was talking to a brother. He's an older brother. Brother's around 40. Brother 47 now. Used to be in the streets. He was a diehard dude in the streets. He had a little conflict with some street dudes, and he wanted to, you know, get back active for a moment to deal with that conflict. And I had to explain to him that you're gonna get murdered if you try to go out there dealing with these dudes. And you know, he looked at me with the mind state like, man, you know who I am, you know what I do. But I've told him, I said, dude, we go to sleep at 9 o'clock so you can get up at 5 to get to work in the morning. You know, you got a job, you got rent to pay, you got bills. You know, you remember what it used to be like to be 100% dedicated to the streets? You didn't have to go to bed at a certain time. That was your job. It was your lifestyle all day long. And so people that think and operate from that perspective, you know, it doesn't matter who the next president is. What matters to them is who got to connect to the plug. What matters to them, and so these dudes can and do operate on a different level. I don't think that they ready to operate at the same level that the Venezuelans are ready to operate in, just simply because of the comfort level that we've experienced here in this country. And you're 100% right about the fact that we're always waiting on somebody else to do it for us. We have never learned, no matter how many people have preached it to us, because a lot of people have preached it to us, from Malcolm to Elijah to Marcus. People have been preaching it to us. We still haven't learned about that do for self philosophy, uplifting our own community, building our own stores, purchasing amongst our own people. We still haven't learned that yet. We just haven't got it. You know, we still believe everybody else's ice is colder. We believe everybody else's water is better. We still believe that. And so that's a hindrance for us as a people. We just simply don't have that.
And it's that cultural aspect that a lot of times gets looked over.
Sure,
a lot of cats that are in the movement talk about, you know, the science and revolutionary science, and it's a science, and they all of these big ass words. Everybody I think is trying to sound like Stokely and what's the name, Angela Davis, using these huge ass words, explaining these things out and not understanding the application. When the reality of it is that same thing you were just saying. You know, we get to a point, most of us, a lot of us, get to a point where you got a 9 to 5. As soon as you have a 9 to 5, in my mind, that will put you out of the game, because now with the thing that them cats in the street have over most of the rest of society is that they can move with freedom. They don't have to go and clock in. They don't have to go to bed at a certain time. They can sleep over here, they can sleep over there. They can be anywhere and nowhere all at the same time. When you are crystallized into a mortgage, when you crystallize into a 9 to 5, now you're stuck. You go to your job, well, that's prime. I know you're gonna be at your job for, 9-10 hours. I'm gonna go to your house and just, post up. What you gonna do? which is, the whole squatter thing coming into play. But even just to break into your house, I know you work from this hour to this hour, so I got me a block. Go get me a U-Haul, catch the fellas and go on over here and just clean your house out. So that makes you extremely vulnerable. And that's one of the things that cats like from Venezuela, any place else, is that is the culture. Being up in those neighborhoods and locking it down the way they are gives them that stability of having the income, of having roof over your head, of having all those things that we associate with stability, but still at the same time, because of the culture that they bring with them, they're still able to be everywhere and nowhere. They're able to walk down the streets with an AK or whatever and still disappear. Still don't nobody know where they at, because the community, for a brief moment or prior to integrate, we would have done. We would have had, somebody's back and had them disappear, the whole, guerrillas and all of that type of thing. But because they're bringing that cultural unity over with them that we don't have, because our culture is both that of the individual and that of the victim, we do look to somebody else to take care of our issues and whatnot, call the police to come down and want and all of that, as opposed to doing for self. And we know, the history of it and the reasons for it. And we have to keep breaking those things down over and over and trying to get that understanding to as many folks as possible. But for various reasons, we don't have that cultural framework. We have that cultural framework that says you go to the government, you go get a big government titty and let it feed you in some way, form, or fashion. And these cats don't have any of that. They're coming in, you have somebody, if the government gives them money, which they've been doing, they're going to take that. But that's not stronger than the Spanish that they share with all these other cats. That's not stronger than the religion and the food and the ways that, you move from Venezuela. Just moving is different. Being in whatever other country, being in France, is you move differently than you move in the US, just because it's a different culture, a different area. But them importing that culture with them allows them to move much like they move back home. And so being bold like that, and again, if you get arrested for a crime, you coming from Venezuela and you get arrested for a crime and you go to jail, number one, 9 times out of 10, if they make bail and come out, they're not showing up for court. I wouldn't. I go the fuck back to Venezuela or someplace else, or just disappear in another city in the US because they don't know where the hell you are. And there are plenty of Spanish-speaking enclaves around the country of Venezuelans and others that they can blend into and change their name and nobody ever know the difference. So they have all of these tools at their disposal, all of these advantages that we're not even aware of, that they're utilizing and going to utilize. And as more of the, upper echelons of the gang culture or whatever street life culture they're bringing with them, as they get more sophisticated about how the rules and whatnot work up here, because the police still are supposed to maintain the appearance of justice and that the law is being upheld, especially when it's not being upheld. It's of prime importance that it looks like it is. And so they know that they have those rules. These other cats coming in the country don't have those rules. They're going to do whatever they need to do. And that pretty much, gives them a huge advantage over those sisters and brothers that are here, and everybody's, and it's not even just that it's going to stay in the hood. I think that's something people think, that they're just going to come from one hood, the penitentiaries or whatever in Venezuela, and come and be in the poor folks' neighborhood. That shit's going to spread. That shit is going to open up. That shit is going to become a way of life for enough of the population here that everybody else is going to have to adjust. Even those in the nice houses and blah, blah, blah are going to have to make adjustments, if for no other reason, because the cost of living is going to go up that much more because of this influx of folks from outside the country. And that's just one group. We're talking about Venezuelans, but it's all kinds of motherfuckers in this country. They were catching people from countries all over the world, from Iran to the Sudan, coming up through Mexico. So you've got all of these different cultural elements that are of not just cultural elements in the sense of cohesion or that sort of thing, but the cultural paradigm of poverty. These folks that are coming here know what the fuck poverty is. They know You know, you see homelessness on Skid Row or some shit like that. That's regular shit for them. That's shit they grew up in. That's everyday life. They've seen that. That's not anything new for them. So just the fact that you have a bridge that goes all the way across the river that you have to sleep under, you got a bridge that goes all the way across the river. That's an upgrade. You know, fuck you talking about? And I don't mean that literally, but in that sense that, yeah, you're still struggling, but you're struggling at a higher level of existence. So this is an upgrade for a lot of these folks, and we don't fucking understand that. You know, again, I've mentioned before, you have a group of people in the Palestinians that are used to chasing fucking army tanks with a rock and throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails at tanks, at people with automatic weapons pointed at them. This is what they're used to. 13-year-olds being arrested with an AR pointed at their head. This is what they're used to. So the shit that this country is doing ain't phasing them. It's not, okay, we dealt with that. That's easy. We've dealt with that. So there's a level of existence that they're willing to accept that we're not. We want to have things pretty and soft. And that's going to be a part of our downfall, because we want things pretty and soft. And these cats coming here with the real rugged, grimy background. And we're so busy trying to make every fucking body our friend. You know, we want to latch on to the fucking gay movement, to the Palestinian movement, to every damn movement we can get a hold of except our own movement. We can't get our own bowel movements right, but we want to run along and make everybody a part of our movement, our struggle, what we got going on. And that shit is just crazy to me. And I'm talking specifically about the movement, the struggle, people who call themselves soldiers and all of that, these organizations and whatnot, who ally themselves, have no concept of what an alliance is. But we're trying to ally ourselves with other groups of people with more power. Go ahead and ally yourself with the Venezuelans. Go ahead and see how long that lasts. See how profitable that is for the Black community. We will once again end up at the bottom with some cats who just rolled up in here, bogarted, showed that they were really badass and were willing to do whatever it took, including, fuck off your grandmama and not even think about it. And we're not ready for that shit. We don't have the heart, we don't have the stomach for that shit. This shit, just on that alone, will cause a lot of that shit to fold. I guarantee you. It's one thing with the, back in the day when cats had to struggle to get over here. Now it's just a phone call, and you got a busload of motherfuckers coming to your neighborhood now. The playing field has changed. They are ushering people in, and we're not prepared for that influx of a lifestyle that's willing to accept much worse than what we've become conditioned to take. And that's going to be a pain.
Hey, brother, I was going to see if Shareef got on this.
Hummus, babe. You with me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So basically, bro, I want to do like a little historical thing. Like after World War II, during World War II, this country let a bunch of immigrants over into this country from Mexico. They stayed here, they worked during the war, and right after the war was over in the early 50s, the United States deported their ass, put them out the country. Then, in the 1980s, same thing. They let a bunch of Mexicans over, and by the time George W. Bush got in there, he started putting them out the country again. Obama let them in, Trump picked a bunch of them up and put them out. But the reason why they do this, man, is because of capitalism. It's because of the simple fact that these corporations and these companies need workers. After, during the COVID thing, man, only thing you seen after the COVID was getting ready to be over was help wanted, job, apply for jobs, this and that and this. Now we done found out that Tyson Chicken, they didn't cut like thousands of jobs from like American employees, and they didn't give the jobs to the Venezuelans, which that's supposed to be illegal. But these corporations hire these people, man, to come in, and they pay them low wages. They know that they're not going to be filing no civil rights complaints. Because like the brothers say, man, they come from a situation that's way worse than this. So whatever hardships that we got over here as Americans really don't affect them like that. It's a walk in the park for them. But this is the time, man, that I feel that Black people, man, should be taking advantage of this situation that's coming in. What do I mean by that? You know, we need to start, number one, sticking together, spending money with each other, and trying to build our institutions and resources during this time when we see this influx of people coming in, buying property. I remember when Mexicans was coming in here left and right from the 80s, the mid 90s, all the way up to the 2000s. Mexicans was coming in and Black folks was giving up their property, losing their property. You know, their parents was getting old, dying. The neighborhood that I live in right now, brothers, right across the street. I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah, we can see you, Cap.
Let me walk around here so you can really see it. But over here, brother, is a Black-owned, this is a Black-owned shopping complex. You got a bar right there, you got a grocery store, and there's 2 restaurants on the other side that you can't see. This is the last Black-owned property, and the people that rent from them is pretty much Black. It's an Indian dude that runs the grocery store, but a Black woman still owns that property over here. This is the last piece of property that Black folks own in Denver, where they control, you know, the resources over in this neighborhood. But if you look around, they done built like a center over there. They got a library. They got a rec center over there. And this neighborhood is gentrified. You know,
is that Four Corners? We talking?
No, this not. No, this ain't 5 Points. This is Park Hill.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm over by the Holly right now. So, you know, basically, man, we done seen this happen before. This used to be like a 90% Black neighborhood, and now it's not. You know, and it didn't happen overnight. It took about 25 years for it to happen, but Black people are actually a minority in this neighborhood. I think we at 30 or 35% right now, where you got like 25% Hispanic, and then the other percentage is white. Maybe 40% white. So, you know, when we see these influxes of immigrants coming in, man, we have to take advantage of sticking together, pooling our resources together, buying property, starting schools, doing whatever we got to do, man, to make sure that, you know, our descendants have something.
But let me ask you something even on that note, going back to 5 Points, what we was talking about. I remember back when I was in Denver, we at least had an area, or there was a council to where we talked about Black business owners and Black community activists coming together to be able to create an intention in terms of controlling and maintaining the control of our community. Do we still have that element to where we do have something to where we're consolidating or coming to in terms of somebody that want to be a part of a larger dynamic that way from collective activism?
Sure, you do. You have a collective activism here in Denver. And I don't know if you remember Brother Jeff or not, but his community center down there is kind of like a hub of Black activism. He still has Black Dollar Saturdays. He still does the free jazz on every 4th Friday. You know, during Thanksgiving and Christmas and stuff, you know, we fed thousands of people here, you know, in Denver with meals, prepared meals, and the turkeys, all of that kind of stuff. There's a group here, and you might be interested in this, brother. It's a brother named Stephen Long here that he just had first-degree murder, double first-degree homicide charges dropped against him after spending a year up in the system. He shot 2 white boys during a road rage incident. He had a road rage incident on I-25. These white boys jumped out their car, ran over there, and tried to snatch him out the window. They was beating him, you know, with hands and fists and feet and all of this. And the brother managed to get to his rod and he laid both of them down. And he ended up spending like months and months in jail. The family finally raised the bail and he got out on bail. And just like 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was a contingency of community activists that was putting pressure on the DA's office for them to drop this case because it was clearly self-defense. We had another case here with a brother named Michael Hancock Jr., who was doing Lyft or Uber, and an Asian man was drunk in the back seat and grabbed the steering wheel, and him and the dude was fighting, and they on the highway, and the dude pulled his rod and laid the Asian dude down. This brother sat in jail. They wouldn't give him no bond, no nothing. You know what I'm saying? And he ended up going to trial and getting acquitted at trial. He's out now. But just for a black man to defend himself in the state of Colorado is a task, brother. It's really a task because we have several incidents where black people have defended themselves here and ended up going to jail. A young brother that lived up in the mountains going to school, some white kids was bullying him, pushed him on the schoolyard, and the brother swung and broke one of the little white boys' jaws. They had him in jail. Even though everybody said the white boys was bullying him, they started to fight. But in Colorado, they say, well, you can defend yourself, but you can't do excessive force. So if he just pushed you and you broke his jaw, then you in the wrong. Now, how am I supposed to respond when somebody is attacking me? I'm fighting to save my life, perhaps. So I'm gonna use whatever force I deem necessary to protect myself, you know. But we've had these cases here, man, and with the immigrants coming, and like I said, I haven't seen actual Crips or Bloods, because them the two major gangs we got out here fighting with the Venezuelans, but I could see that happening in the future when the drug game or the pistol, you know, the illegal weapons game come into play. But as of right now, I can say this: ain't no Venezuelans too much running around here trying to punk black people. What I see is, like, especially amongst the black Venezuelans, the majority of them is coming over here trying to be us, or cosplay as us, or tether off of us. You know, they saying that they black to get resources, but then when something go down, they waving the Venezuelan flag. We had a situation here last month when the Venezuelan elections were going on. About 1,000 Venezuelans met up in a mall parking lot, man, and was like protesting or celebrating whatever the Venezuelan election. They was popping guns and shooting guns in the air, and the police didn't do shit. You can look it up in the Denver news. The police, they was out there. It was so many of them out there, and they didn't know who had weapons. The police was afraid to go over there and confront them. You see what I'm saying?
I saw some video of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, you gotta, you know, we gotta be on point about what we doing, but we gotta be proactive instead of reactive. That's what I'm trying to say.
Mr. Moderator?
I'm sorry, I was muted the whole time, didn't realize it.
What I was about to say.
When I was thinking of that, we mentioned earlier about the poverty element. Remember that the three things are one of the, I would say, kind of sort of the trifecta that deals with destruction of the black community, or any community for that matter, is poverty, ignorance, and oppression. And so when we talk about that and we couple that with our situation of not having a sense of planned communities as it applies to black people that are captive in America, then the thing is again, we're further behind the curve than anybody else that comes over here, because we don't have a sense of being connected, because we all stay in one community. We stay in one community simply because we've been confined to that community. but we've been confined as individuals. So that's kind of why I asked you about this, the collective. And the thing about that is, what is it going to take for us to be able to, what I call, multiply our numbers in terms of those people that are conscious enough to know that the only way that we're going to be able to make a true element of change is to collectively, intentionally come together as Black people and start working towards self-determination. And I would even have to say Black nationalism, because we realize that until we put ourselves in a position of power and we recognize what that power is, then ain't nothing gonna move. It's kind of like what Syke talked about when he said earlier that even Black folks that are in the streets from that level, they ain't really concerned about the politics of the country because they have their own internal politics that they work in. Well, that's the same thing that what you got with folks coming in from the outside. The deal is they recognize and they have an intent in terms of where they see themselves going and a roadmap to get there, legal or illegal. The point being, there is an intention on progression. But now when you look at us, we've been so divided amongst ourselves that we tend to still approach it from an individual perspective. So then when you talk about trying to consolidate and deal with collective power, we have been Willie lynched to the degree to where we are afraid to work with one another, and we see ourselves as enemies before we able to come together. And so it's kind of like at that point to where I'm going in one of the things he said, what is it going to take and where are we at? When do we realize that we at a point to where, because of the state of war we in as a people, we actually have no choice? So at one point, do we wake up and realize that reformism is not the answer for us? Although elements of, again, pacification comes through reform, elements of entitlement comes through reform, going into what we say in the Black Panther Party on our point number 2 on our platform, we talk about the fact that we have to continuously disregard the practice of dependency from the systematic and systemic modes of oppression being this system. So realizing that we're dealing with a level of dependency that has been taught and bred into us, it is going to take us being able to really truly recognize that we have to disconnect ourselves from that. And in doing so, that means that I have nobody but myself to be accountable toward in my own community in order to come up. So now we have to start banding together. Now we have to start having intentional planned Black community empowerment, Black community activism, Black community action. So that means we have to start working with one another, and we find ways to do so as opposed to finding ways to continually cut each other down. And so with all these elements working against us, we have to realize that when at the end of the day, ain't nobody gonna save Black people but Black people. So what is it gonna take for us to realize that we have to pull ourselves off that damn titty and come up and pull ourselves together as a Black people?
Here is the problem, boy. Here's the issue right here.
Hey, come on, Syke. Go ahead, break it down.
I'm finna turn to Brother E for a moment.
Oh shit.
Here's the problem. The problem is the lack of culture. That's it. I mean, it sounds too simple for that to be it. But that, I always read this definition. I done said it 100 times on this on our shows, but I always go back to it because he broke it down so nicely. But it's the definition from Dr. Kurt Herod and his book, Who Are We? This definition could be found on page 10 when he gives the definition for culture. I'm gonna read it and then I'm gonna give an explanation. He said culture. A lot of people don't know what culture really is. When they hear culture, they think it means, oh, we black, he black, I'm black. That's our culture. That's what they think it means. They think it may mean, oh, the history of us. We got to study our history. They think it means all that. And all of that is not culture. Culture refers to the behaviors, beliefs, and adaptive mechanisms that a group of people sharing a common experience have constructed to cope with their environment. It is learned, taught, and unique to a group of people. A group of people's unique culture is crucial and irreplaceable for their prosperity. This is what he said. I got to say it again. I got to do the Dr. Umar. I got to repeat it. A group of people's unique culture is crucial and irreplaceable for their prosperity. The disruption of a group's culture impedes the collective accomplishment of that group and prevents the individuals in that group from achieving their potential. It is no coincidence that very high rates of alcoholism, unemployment, and failure to find a place in society are found in two groups whose culture was nearly destroyed by Europeans. Those two groups he described as African Americans and Native Americans. And keep in mind, I know what the listening audience is thinking. Oh, he's reading from Tony Brada or something. This is not a black author. This is a white author. I know some of y'all got to hear it from a white person before you believe it to be true. But that is our issue.
I know I do.
Tony Brown, Tony Brown, I can't remember the book, but I remember he was explaining that a lot of times we get in this habit of thinking that immigrants like the Vietnamese or the Koreans, when they come over, they get an immediate loan from the bank, and that's how they start the stores in our neighborhoods. I remember in the 90s, it was real tough. They had all the bazaars, Big T Bazaar, Community Bazaar, Soul Bazaar, and you'd have all these Koreans in there. And people were thinking, man, they easily get loans, but that wasn't it. He explained that these groups, because their culture is intact, and they practice basically community banks, where all the members of that family maybe move into the same house together, and they would take a portion of their income, kind of like what Christians call a tithe, paying tithes, or what a Muslim calls zakat. They would take a portion, 10-15% of whatever they made, and they'd all put it together in their own little bank. And then one of the members of the family would have a business idea. They would loan that to the member of the family, start the business. That member of the family would employ the other members of the family, make money, give it back to the bank, and they would continue to operate that process. They was able to do that because of their culture. They had things in common that allowed them to move together. There can be no unity. There can be no trust. There can be none of those things without a culture binding the people together. And one of the major things that happened to black people in America, one of the first things that happened in order to be able to put you in the condition of slavery, was your culture had to be ripped from you. If you look at movies like the Roots, it shows you that. They beat him, cut his foot off, everything. Stop running, stop calling yourself Kuta Kinte. Your name is Toby. I need you to operate as Toby. And this is very important. You have to reverse this. And the cold thing about that is that it's almost impossible to reverse. I hate to say that. I hate to be the downer, but it's almost impossible to reverse it, because as Tony Brada said in his book Survival Strategy for Africans in America, one of the things that we lost was a taste for our own culture. We don't have a desire for it. And it's hard to feed a person something that they no longer have a desire for. And that's why we can't unite. But here's the thing, and I'm gonna hear it up. We have subcultures that have the ability to practice more unity and move in unison more than our overall culture. Those subcultures, like a Crip, straight up diehard Crip set. They have a language, they have a dress code, they have a patois, a way of speaking, a code that they're able to operate from that moves in more unity than the overall black culture. Same thing with disciples, gangster disciples, black disciples, vice lords. You'll see, and I'm not talking about in places where people are trying to be it because they heard it on music. I'm talking about in places where they grew up with it, where they grew up in it, where that has become their lifestyle. You know, where dudes talk about the Crip God. This is their lifestyle. They have a walk, they have a dance, they have things that unite them and connect them together, and they formulate that same concept in their communities. That's what culture looks like, and that's just a subculture. And as a people, black people don't have that, like the Jews in this country have, like even the Italians had. You know, different groups of people have that, and we don't have that, and that's the issue. That's the biggest issue. Hell, you Panthers can't even connect together correctly. You so-called revolutionary brothers can't connect together correctly. But go ahead. I think somebody wanted to say something.
Yeah, I guess I'll play the brother Syke here. I disagree. Or maybe that's me playing me. I disagree.
You playing you.
Okay, my bad. I'm gonna play me for a second. Hold on. I would say that it's not so much a lack of culture, it's a lack of our culture and an overabundance of their culture. You know, racism, white supremacy, we talked about is a system of racial subjugation that lifts one group of people up at the expense of everybody else. That's the what that racism is. But we have to dig into, once we get past that, we have to have a grasp and understanding of the how that they've been able to put themselves in the position that they're in is because, it's been said the Ma'afa, form of slavery back in the day was horrible, it was this, it was that, and it was traumatic as fuck. But what ultimately destroyed, at this point, we've been destroyed, whether we stay that way or not, Lazarus, all that kind of stuff, that's for the future to deal with. But at this point, we're destroyed. And what did it was social integration. We were integrated into this country as chattel slavery. And we've always been some form of chattel. We still get treated the same way. We don't even have to have that discussion. We understand that we are still in that position. So economically, we were integrated into the society. But when we integrated socially, we started taking on their values, their ways of operating, their ways of being. We started going to their churches. We started marrying their daughters. We started, learning to be child molesters and all of that from the best. So it's not just that we don't have our culture. We bought into their culture, that culture of the individual. And as long as we believe that we are these individuals, we have nothing bigger than ourselves to hold on to. So my individual experience trumps whatever the hell you got going on, because there is nothing greater than me. And so I have to do what it is I have to do to protect what it is I believe in, which is me, the individual. And this is the ideology, this is the belief system that we bought into. And so we display that culture. I was having a conversation with a sister some time ago, and it was around that time that I guess it was a doctored or AI photo of LeBron in a dress, and people thought it was real at first. And so we had this conversation and about what's wrong with him if he wants to express his, if that's a part of his personality or whatever, to express his authentic true self by wearing a dress. Why is that a problem? And the problem is the question itself. It's what is more important? This dude who believes and I'm not saying he did or didn't, I don't give a shit about the pair. There are enough black dudes wearing dresses. We don't have to talk about LeBron, whether it's true or not, because it's happening. But the question is whether his individual desires to serve his individual self, his little I, is more important than his responsibility to the big I. And we in this culture, in this society, in this world we live in, have been taught that yes, what he wants to do is more important than the effects that it will have on the community. When you have little boys looking up to these males wearing dresses and acting effeminate and doing things that females do, and going in for the money, trampling over other folks and doing whatever they got to do to get that dollar, serving their earthly, lustful selves as opposed to the higher self, which says that we are we. And there's no way around that. It baffles me how simple that statement is. We are we. There is no, somebody on Instagram, on our Instagram tried to say something about that's why I separate myself from those types of black folk. You don't get to do that any more than white folks today who will turn around and say, when you bring up slavery, one of the first things they like to say is, well, I never owned a slave. We understand that. And it's dumb. Of course, you didn't own a slave, but it is a legacy that you inherit because you are a group of that, you are part of that group. Same way, I can't step away and say that some brother who did some foul something is no longer a part of we. He's we, and I have to own that negative. I have to own the shadow self of the whole. You can't just have, Jay-Z's a baller. You can't just have Obama was a president. You can't have all of these things you want to prop up and say are dope. You have to embrace that most negative aspect of who it is we are for us to be able to move forward. But as long as we bought into their idea of the self, their idea of culture, we have too much of that culture that we've accepted and bought into from the bottom up, whether it's sukiyaki or whatever, Sukihana, what, I don't know the chick's name. That chick that's been bothering Umar, the chick I'm talking about.
Sukiyano.
Yeah, Suki Yaya. As long as, you know, from her level, from, you know, street ass niggas, da 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 da, on up to Obama. As much as we love Obama, Obama was paid and voted. If you look at his scorecard, what he voted for while he was in office, every bill that came across, or while he was a senator, every bill that came across his desk that favored J.P. Morgan, some other big ass bank, Chase, all of them, he co-signed that. He voted for that shit to make them more powerful and us less powerful. The Stiegel Glass shit, all of that shit. He did that shit. So, but I, not being an Obama fan, have to accept, yeah, he's weak, because we are weak. There is no distinction, and we have to embrace all aspects of it. And that's something that we historically have done. And one of the reasons we were in a better mind space, because we didn't try to, you know, white religion, they try to say, oh, that's the devil, you know, the devil does bad stuff. But when something good happens, that's me and the Lord, me working in the Lord and whatnot. We don't want to accept that negativity is me working in the devil. It's me doing the wrong thing. It's me doing the fucked up shit. It's somebody doing that fucked up shit. We want to just accept the stuff that makes us feel, you know, happy-go-lucky. And that's this culture. That's what this culture encourages us to do. The individual just wants to feel good and live my best life and YOLO and all of that shit, and not buy into anything that's going to force them to face the shadows, not just of the self, but as the community as a whole. And that's so for me, that's the how of racism, white supremacy. They've convinced us that we are fucking individuals, and individuals cannot, by definition, will never, ever unite with anything else, because as soon as me and Ward get together and we decide we're going to unite and try to get this thing done, it's no longer about me. It's no longer me doing what I want to do. Now I have to compromise and come to conclusions and whatnot with somebody else. So that takes away from serving myself. So this whole idea of even being an entrepreneur, all of this shit is based on I'm an individual. So that's the culture that we have. And that's the culture that we have too much of. And because of that, we can't find our way to unite.
I want to say this. You brought something, caught my attention when you said this. Leads me back to Hugh's book, Revolutionary Suicide. That's the deeper spiritual part of the book. What you just said, we are we. That's what he said at the very end of the book. And he broke down like 4 or 5 different things that revolutionary suicide was, from the most top level or shallow end of the pool. Basically, we all understand it, being willing to die for what you believe in. Then he went through different stages, and he ended the book with that, the dying of the individual self, so that the people could actually live, so that God could actually manifest itself as the people. And he ended it with, we are we. He ended it with that concept, that idea, that understanding that we are we. The true manifestation of the people is the death of the individual. He ended it with that concept and that ideal in the book, which is a good thing to good note. Go ahead, E.
That's the whole idea of Black liberation theology. I don't give a shit what you call your religion, but you have to be able, you know, the Bible talks about, or somebody in the church, I forget, the slave cannot, you know, you can't serve 2 masters. Yeah. You know, you're gonna love one, hate the other. And that, you're right, that is the spiritual aspect of it, regardless of your religion. Understanding that whatever that religion is has to empower you to serve the higher self. The higher self does not talk about you getting new shoes. It doesn't talk about you getting a new TV. It doesn't talk about you being a baller. It doesn't talk about you getting money, none of that. So to serve the higher self is to serve the people, something beyond yourself. Serving the lower self is just that. Getting something for your body, for your mouth. You want to get high, you want to get drunk, you want to kick it, you want to parlay, you want to feel good. All of those things are personal to me, as opposed to me doing something, even though it's uncomfortable for me, it feeds into a higher something. And that higher something only goes one direction. And so if once that's connected with a doctrine, a dogma, it becomes a religion, you know, and capitalism is a religion like anything else. But once that's tied into your church or your synagogue or your mosque or whatever, that's when it begins serving, for real, begins serving that higher something.
And before we get ready to close out, you did say something that caught my attention that I wanted to build on real quick, because you talked about all the people that say revolution is scientific. Y'all know one of my favorite black women in history is Assata Shakur. And I'm gonna read this quote from Assata. She said, it was in the autobiography of Assata, page 243. She said, one of the hardest lessons we had to learn is that revolutionary struggle is scientific rather than emotional. I'm not saying that we shouldn't feel anything, but decisions can't be based on love or anger. They have to be based on the objective conditions and on what is rational, unemotional thing to do. Now, when we say revolution is scientific, you know how I am. I like to deal with the etymology. So, to read Webster's definition of science, and so we can understand what science, something being scientific would actually mean. In his definition, he says, the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. So in the etymology, the word comes from the Latin sire, S-C-I-R-E. It comes from the Latin sire, which breaks down as to know. But the real root of the word literally means to cut or to separate. So it literally means to know by separating or cutting, by dissecting. Or if we talk about mentally or psychologically, we're saying to analyze information. So to break it down, the same what we do when we eat. If somebody gives you a T-bone steak, you don't take the whole steak and throw it in your mouth. You don't do that. You cut it into smaller pieces to make it easily digestible. Then you devour the entire steak. You synthesize it. So the whole concept of being scientific is to first analyze, to break it down, to separate, and then synthesize. And we talk about the concept of revolution, then when we talking about cutting or breaking it down, we have to be talking about looking into different various revolutionary theories or even successful revolutionary movements throughout history, throughout the world. We cut those things down, analyze them, and then take the best parts of life. We take the best parts from them and then synthesize them and not simply just recreate. Because one thing we learned in the Art of War, Sun Tzu talks about the best way of creating a strategy is not to always look at what historically worked, because your opponent is doing the same thing. And if that has historically worked, if he always came out and threw 3 jabs and then a hook, and he's done that for years, maybe he'll change his strategy up. So you can't depend on that necessarily working. So to be truly scientific, you got to come up with new experiments. And then you got to go through the process of proving whether or not those concepts work or not. And that's going through the whole scientific process. If we're going to say revolution is scientific, then it's one thing we when we was in Dallas, in the Dallas chapter, New Black Panther Party, we did not necessarily want to do everything that Huey and Bobby them did. We liked many of those things, and as E talked about earlier, we can never disrespect the elders, because if it wasn't for the elders who came before us, we wouldn't be able to carry the mantle if we didn't take what was passed down to us and build on top of it. And that's one of the things that we're not saying that to the youth of today, to take everything we say, just run with it and do exactly what we're saying. We're saying be scientific in it, take what we're passing down, build on top of it, and this thing is supposed to get better and better and better at every stage. That's what's supposed to happen. So I just wanted to, because you brought it up, how the people are always talking about revolution is scientific, and sometimes I think they like to say that because it sounds cool, but I don't think they truly understand what all of that really means.
And I think the majority of them, again, everything exists within a cultural paradigm. And in this cultural paradigm, science is external. Science is what you can measure. Science is what you can put on the table, take a tape measure out and measure it. And that's the cultural perspective. When I hear cats talking about, not you, but, these other conversations with organizations that I've had, they're approaching it from a European approach to science. We were the first scientists. We were the first ones to break things down and want to know and to understand and all that. We did that, but we had it in the context of what we're breaking down. We're breaking down something bigger into these smaller pieces. We have gotten caught in the smaller pieces, and that's all that we can see. And part of that smaller piece, again, is the individual mindset and this scientific, what I can touch and feel, reality that we've bought into. So, you know, yes, I wasn't saying, and I'm not saying you were saying that, I was saying, but I would never say, or I don't see me ever saying that it's not scientific, but it's science with a cultural paradigm that has to exist. It's like dancing. You see sisters on the continent in our culture, dancing and moving their hips and, you know, gyrating their bodies, and some of them half naked and da-da-da-da-da-da. But that exists within a culture that doesn't debase womanhood. It doesn't seek to subjugate the feminine aspect the way this one does. There is respect, there is a story, there is a purpose. More often than not, that dance that they're doing has something to do with praising a higher self, with praising the community, with something bigger than the individual that's doing it. But all we focus on, oh, she got a big ass. That's all we see. If she can shake her ass on the continent, why can't I shake my ass over here? That's our culture, but it's not our culture, because the culture is not the shaking ass. The culture is, why is she shaking her ass? Why is she dancing the way she's dancing? But we're caught up in the breakdown. We're caught up in those pieces. We take the shaking the ass to be the thing. No, what is she? She's shaking her ass for money? She's shaking her ass just for attention? Is she shaking her ass just to feed her own ego? And that's the problem. So, you know, science even has to exist with the proper perspective going into it and utilizing it. And much as white folks try to say that science is objective and stands alone, that's bullshit. Nothing is objective. Nothing stands apart from itself to observe itself. And what I'm saying is, every scientist that goes in to conduct an experiment has an idea. Much as he wants to try to play it off and say, no, I'm just going in to pick it apart and see what's what, he has an idea of what it is he thinks the problem is, or thinks is being said, or whatever. It's like the Supreme Court. They talk about how they're objective and they stand back and they're not political, blah, blah. It's bullshit. Every Supreme Court justice has their own ideology, has their own perspective on life, has their own what they think is the right thing, what they think should happen, da 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 da. And that's just human nature. But again, we're caught up in the pieces that have been broken down through this great experiment, and we're stuck in thinking that those pieces are the whole, not realizing that they are all part of something. And to figure out, going back in reverse order, going back, what is it that these things are supposed to do? You know, they're supposed to move us in a particular direction, and the direction that these things are moving us in are further and further away. You know, we talk about coming together and whatnot, and one of our things, I know me and Sight, we used to fight with war all the time, is getting folks to do, and that for us, for me, I know for certain, I don't speak for other people, but that getting someone to do something is a non-starter. Again, because we're individuals, but just the idea of getting someone else as opposed to simply doing it and knowing that your contribution is moving us in a direction, or at least pushing back against all the waves that are pushing us to the wrong, pushing back against that. And that's what has to happen. We have to start doing as opposed to trying to get folks to do. We have to stop that shit and do it. Those of us who say that we know have to do what it is we say we know. If we know this is what has to happen, then we have to do it. Those community banks that you were talking about, they do that in the Bahamas still. They do that in Haiti and other cultures and other communities. They still do that shit. We still do that shit. But we in this country are so individualized, you know, again, it has a different effect being here in the belly of the beast. We got the best of the propaganda from age 0 on up, and still get the best of the propaganda that teaches us that we're individuals. So no, I'm not giving that nigga my money. I'm gonna take it to the bank, because it's a bank. Because I've been told that the bank is where you put your money, as opposed to trusting your family and building with your family and keeping that shit in-house. And that's just one of the cultural expressions that's missing from what we're doing.
True indeed. Brother Shareef Ali, we appreciate you for coming on, brother. You gave us a lot of education. We're finna get ready to close out. Do you have anything you want to say before we close out?
Hey, brother, I'm just saying, you know, I'm glad y'all invited me on y'all platform today. And, you know, I love listening to you brothers and learning from you brothers, because steel's sharp as steel. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed.
And these forums are necessary, man, where Black men can come and just build together and talk, and then apply what we talking about to our communities. I think that's what Brother E was talking about. We love to talk. As Black folks, we can talk, but when it comes to doing and applying and manifesting what we talking about, there the issue comes in. And each one teach one. If each one of us do a little bit, a lot to get done. So, like I said, brothers, I really, really thank you for letting me on this platform today to talk about the realities that's going on here in Denver. And I hope when you have forums like this in the future, you think about me and let me be a part of them. Thank you.
No doubt, brother. We're always looking for some wiser brothers to come on and build and teach with us. So we appreciate you for coming on, brother. And we definitely gonna hold you to that. You just messed up by getting us that invite, cause we sure gonna bring you back.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
All right. And with that, this was your Panther 48 with our special guest, Shareef Ali, hitting us up out of Denver. If you've been with us this long, subscribe to the channel, like the video. Peace and power.